All right. Hello. So this is going to be a very quick one. Um, Basically, I just wanted to point out something that I'm probably going to do an article on it later, write something on it later, but I thought I'd put this out on video quickly. The main thing that I wanted to get across is that there's this new thing in South Africa that calls itself the center right. Now, some people have in the past referred to the DA as center right. They're social democrats. That's fundamentally a left wing philosophy. I think the same thing is happening with people who call themselves the center right as well. So they're selling this idea that there's this silent majority in South Africa that shares all the same values. And there's a lot of evidence to support this. So if you look at opinion polls, and you can pick any of the major sort of opinion polling groups that do professional stuff, whether it's Social Research Foundation, Victory Research, that's Gareth van Onselen's group, whether it's what's another good one? There's Afrobarometer as well, and the Brenthurst Foundation. So let's say those four, the ones that consistently put out relatively decent things. There are two consistent results that they put out. They all tend to agree on what people's voting intentions are, and they're relatively good at getting it right. Victory Research is still a market leader, and they're also relatively good at sort of reproducing very similar results on opinion polling. And you can see the same with the Institute of Race Relations. Now, what they tend to argue is that everyone shares the same values in South Africa. There's a huge sway of the people who are, broadly speaking, Christian, broadly speaking, don't have an existential hatred for other races. And broadly speaking, oh, beg your pardon. Broadly speaking, think that the biggest problems in the country are jobs and crime and, the economy and security. Basically, but this is obvious. This is like saying, well, we're all the same. We all have to eat food and breathe air and drink water. This is what I think is the main problem with these polls, is that they're just measuring ordinary human beingness. And it doesn't actually tell you anything about the people on the ground, because you get this huge amount of common values sort of vaguely emerging out of society, and then you get, well, what exactly? You get the same divided electoral result along ethnic lines across the country. Some people stress that it is a class division. Okay, those two are very coincident. I suspect that it'll tend back towards a race divide over time because of the nature of what's happening in schools. And Richard Wilkinson's pointed this out a lot, and I've seen it myself, is that my generation, my cohort and younger, Black people are more and more hardline. People are more and more left-leaning. I don't know if left makes a sense, but let's say hardline Black nationalists. There's all this Azanian critical theory, the very harsh attitudes towards the white minority. They increase with the generations, right? So there's a paradox in that the middle-aged middle class are that came out of sort of about my age and older, mid-30s to mid-40s. They'll tend to actually have relatively moderate and common sense views about race relations, right? But they're on their way out, and they're being replaced by a younger cohort that's much more radical. So I don't think that the sort of class-only analysis is going to hold over time. This is just my intuition. I don't know for certain. But I struggled. No, I had to write this down. It sort of occurred to me that there's three questions that will be able to remove the difficulty in bridging the gap between polling, opinion polling, and electoral polling. So when you go to the ballot box, you see the same results, and the electoral polling is actually predicting ballot results relatively well. I mean, there's always a post-election deviation where people just start acting out and saying, yeah, screw this or screw that, or yeah, those guys are doing great or those guys are doing great. And then the country settles back into normality and nothing changes and everyone moves back into their own places. Because no one can really change the country for structural reasons, right? Okay, and we can talk about that another time. I've talked about it ad nauseum, but this is a particular problem. So now when I talk about the center-right, I'm talking about friends of mine like Roman Kabanak, people I respect like Franz Kruger, Gabriel Makin, several people in the Institute of Race Relations who are fairly smart, people I have big problems with, but are sort of at least directionally trying to go in the right direction, like Rob Hasselhoff. So there's a lot of these people who they're trying to sort of replicate Western populism in South Africa, and I don't think this works at all. It really doesn't work, because there's this portion of the white population that you're going to be hanging out with who are going to say the same thing. There's a portion of the colored population who respond to a non-racial reaction, a sort of non-racial reactionary sort of hardliner position, but it's a very particular flavor, and it's not the same as like a white reactionary position. And people are not picking up on this. So there's like a lot of different things that are sort of subtly not there. I've always sort of said that, South Africa is like a funhouse mirror version of the West. So you think you're kind of seeing a certain shape that you recognize, and then you try and use that shape to predict what's standing behind you, and you get lost, right? It doesn't work that way, And the problem is that people are trying to apply this sort of like Trump and, Geert Wilders and Nigel Farage business onto South Africa. And the thing is, Trump was an organic phenomenon, and he was extremely American. This is an extremely American phenomenon. People who've tried to replicate this in Europe, in particular in the UK. Now, Nigel Farage, the problem with him is he's a trap. I mean, he's a left liberal. He's basically Margaret Thatcher with left-wing populist economics. And then, so he's like this, he's terrible. He's not right-wing in any way. If you look at the actual policies, parties, he's like, okay, let's actually keep the open borders. Let's not actually do anything about immigration. Let's, and let's increase welfare spending and nationalize the rail. And just like all of these, the man is daft. They're basically, slightly to the left of Tony Blair, which is bananas considering what people really want from him, which is, anyway, that's another country. That's their own problems. But my sort of point is that people try and replicate these things that are happening in America, outside America, and it doesn't work the same. You're either going to get betrayed, or the message is not even going to reach enough people for you to betray them. So my sort of problem with this sort of center-right thing is I agree with what the people are trying to do. They're trying to get South Africa to fix basic problems so life can go on to being vaguely normal. And so that they can have a life which is not political. But the thing is that doesn't work. You can't do anti-politics. There's no such thing. The second you're participating in politics, you are dealing with patronage networks. You're opposing groups of people. There's, the competition and difference and tension and conflict are natural parts of politics. They're never going to go away. You can't get rid of that. That's even in the most trusting society, divisions are, and the most homogenous society, divisions are never going to go away. Okay. And the thing about the center-right crew is they want to sort of have their cake and eat it too. They want to reject what 65% of the electorate vote for, as well as saying that those people are going to vote for them and they're going to unite the country. It's this very, very bizarre mindset. A very bizarre mindset. Some of them think they can persuade the DA to change, and some of them think that they can start a new party. I think both of these are insane ideas, right? The DA might change if you do start a new party, but then that party has to offer something that's actually practicable. So the DA will go out of their way to neutralize you and to sell a watered-down version of whatever you're doing to the public, and they've been great at it. They have been selling swart gevaar to white hardliners while delivering left-wing progressivism. And I mean, sort of like social democracy, liberal leftism, not like, you know, hardcore ANC Marxism. It's not the same. Let's be clinical about this. They have been playing this triangulation game for a long time. Because they're on the left, they can sort of sell, they could say sort of crazy populist right-wing things every now and again when they lose, when they start losing minority votes. And then it seems like, oh, okay, no, they're fine. They're still not going to do black nationalism, whatever. And then they can go along and sort of comply with black nationalism and global governance and, you know, give this weird sort of milquetoast rainbow nation stuff that's not, doesn't have any substance to it. And I mean, you know, this is kind of the thing. Yeah, okay. So MG, I'll address your. I've got to close the comments tab because they distract me. I'll address them at the end. But look, here's the thing. So we're gonna like all these polls are saying the same thing. They're saying, okay, everyone wants this sort of like everyone wants the immigrants gone. Everyone wants the infrastructure to work. Everyone wants jobs. Everyone wants security. I was like, okay, cool. We can deliver that. But everyone promises that. Do you understand? The only one that no one promises is getting rid of immigrants. I mean, you'll only see that a bit from the PA and a bit from Action SA. All right. I mean, this is one of the most popular things. But if you look at the center right, they're kind of saying, yeah, let's have a real border. But they're not saying, let's get rid of the immigrants. Because that's actually the popular message. People want to mass deport hundreds of thousands, millions of people. Okay. They want to get rid of millions of people out of this country. That's what the people want. Okay, every part of the country wants this. And it's like us who are in the polite part of society, you understand that it's a bit rude and mean to do this to people, right? Because it is. It's very mean to remove people from a country by force, okay? But it's what people want because they understand, you know, economic competition, spatial competition, you know, things like that. Competition for establishing social norms as well. And that's what cultural competition is. It's the competition for establishing social norms and standards. Okay, so what you're going to have here is there are three questions they never ask in these polls. Is they say because it's sort of a stupid question, right? These questions everyone knows what the answer would be, and it's like, well, one, would you ever vote for a party who would make it harder for you to get a job? Would you ever vote for a party who would make it harder for you to get a position in your kids to get into education, right? And would you ever vote for less free goods and services from the government? I'm going to put those three up in your head, okay? Just think about this for a second and see how it splits the country cleanly into, okay? Would you vote for less free goods and services for yourself? For yourself. Would you vote for less jobs for yourself? Would you vote for a harder time getting education for your kids? Now, if you're black, what policies align with those? Okay. Black economic empowerment, employment equity, so on and so forth, right? Quotas. Let's just call it racial quotas. You can just have the whole thing, right? Why would a black voter vote to get rid of racial quotas? They would never do that. Very few of them do, right? But very few of them vote for parties that would get rid of racial quotas. It's around 4 to 5% nationally that will vote like this. Okay. 95% vote for racial quota systems that benefit them. Because the question is, would you get jobs? How do you understand the job market if you're a working class or unemployed black South African? You'll say the government must provide jobs. This is the understanding. There are some people who are entrepreneurial in mindset who don't see it this way, but they are, again, the minority. And the understanding is broadly that the government should provide jobs one of two ways, either by directly employing people or by forcing the private sector to employ them. Okay? And that's something they actually desire. This is why people join unions, so that they can get access to jobs, so that they can get security of employment. This is not rocket science, right? But somehow this escapes people's attention. The people are voting for this because it's in their direct material interest. The other thing is free goods and services. Okay? The DA says economic liberalism cut the budget, right? Then people go like, okay, but are they going to pay my SASSA grant or whatever? This is why the DA is trying so hard to advertise that they are, outspending the DA, outspending the ANC, right? Because they want black people to think, oh, well, the DA is not going to starve grandma. The DA is not going to starve the poor children. They're actually going to give us free stuff, right? But nobody trusts them to do that. And it's a very, very simple thing. It's like, if they are the white party, and they will remain the white party to most people until their leadership is minority white, right? Until the bulk of their party is minority white, until their public communication stops sounding white. Okay? And this, when you have this change, there's an authenticity people recognize. And that authenticity will come along with messages people understand that indicate to them an earnest commitment to constant, never-ending expansion of welfare and free services. Okay? And a firm commitment to constant and expanding privileged access to jobs and education. So these are the dimensions upon which everybody is considering their electoral position. And you can define it by class, or you can define it by race. But white people are not a significant part of the lower classes. And to the extent they are, they understand, they're not going to vote for those parties who are offering big wadges of handouts, because those parties are also offering racial discrimination. Okay? So this clear divide where the races fall along predictable lines, it's not rocket science. But when you look at these polls that sort of show you that everyone agrees on these values, what is that actually telling you? That's telling you that if you sell people common sense, they'll buy whatever if you sell people common sense on the wrapper, they'll buy whatever you think is the road, the common sense path that you've put inside the box. And what I'm saying is that people actually check inside the box, or at least give it a shake before they buy it. And that may sound ridiculous when you're considering what people in South Africa are voting for, because all of us understand intuitively and on the basis of our historical and institutional understanding, which we don't ever actually think that hard about. These are things that are actually handed down to us, right? For the most part. Those of us who have gone through the process of imbibing left-wing ideology and then getting rid of it and trying to figure out why it's true or false, that kind of whole world rebuilding thing, it's not, you realize that it's not common sense. You realize that how these things work, the reason why a government needs to be smaller, or why they need to do this, that, or the other, there is no common sense principle that unites all of these things. You have to figure them out by looking at what has failed and succeeded in history. And there are a few general principles that hold, and there are exceptions to this that are used for dealing with very specific problems, which complicate the picture. Okay? There are political problems which can only be solved by hurting the economy. There are economic problems that can only be solved by becoming unpopular and destabilizing your political system. There are trade-offs everywhere. But the stuff that we understand as minorities, that the stuff that the ANC is doing, broadly speaking, is bad and is destroying everything, and that it's not just that there's some bad apples that are corrupt, that there is something substantial underlying this that is wrong. That understanding is not prevalent outside of minority communities. And even within minority communities, you see differences, right? You see a large number of white people who believe the same things as the ANC, broadly speaking, but shy away from them because it's déclassé. They know that it sort of smells of shebeen, you know. So they're sort of, it's a bad class marker to vote for the ANC. It's like maybe 30 years ago you would have shown yourself to be sophisticated if you supported the ANC, but not anymore. Now it's sort of like, well, we wouldn't want that. And I remember the moment it tipped, you know, when you had when people finally decided, okay, the ANC actually is categorically evil. It's due to actually a guy on Twitter called Dr. Futsek, who's got it was about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. He has like a little profile picture of what's that guy's name? Leon Schuster. And he started this thing on this whole trend of hashtag Futsek ANC and he managed to drive this trend. I mean, he's got banned several times and come back, and he's, you know, but you know, just a sort of nice comic rabble rouser. And he started that meme, and once that sort of took off on Twitter, and everyone was like, yeah, actually, it was a loud enough voice that, because I mean, look, white South Africans are very on Twitter, and I think what it did is it killed a lot of the residual deference that some of the South African left had for the ANC. And so now if you want to see how the white left defend the ANC, they do it indirectly. So you got they'll say like, oh, okay, well, you know, Ramaphosa is not that bad. Okay, but now that they've admitted that Ramaphosa is bad and is part of the ANC and they're all the same, the mode is actually Dan Corder. So Dan Corder will say, okay, well, the ANC is terrible, but fewer people vote for the DA, therefore the ANC is better than the DA. Do you understand how stupid that is? Like, it's like, I don't think he believes any of the arguments he makes. It's like very obviously he doesn't believe in anything he says. His position is just the characters like this who make their career in media, who have like a certain patron that they ascribe to. Like everyone who's in feudalism has never died. So all of us who make it, we either serve a popular audience who bankrolls us, or we serve a patron. Now, I serve a few patrons, so there's a limited amount of criticism. I'll be frank about this, right? I am much more polite with my patrons than I am with people who oppose me. It doesn't mean that I don't have criticisms for them, but my criticisms will come from a certain perspective. So in the past, I've sort of done work for AfriForum, Solidarity, Institute of Race Relations, although we've had kind of a falling out for a while. I've done work for Sakeliga. I love the guys at Sakeliga. Those are the guys. If I want to say someone's doing their shit properly, Sakeliga and Niasa, those are the guys where I can't quite fault them. They're really actually moving towards. They're trying to move things forward. They're trying to see where the next. Always looking for like, where's the next phase of activity, next phase of engagement. How do you ramp it up? So I like them a lot. So there's like a whole cluster of these people. And I have criticisms for the Solidarity movement, but a lot of the people working in that movement are my friends. And they're also patrons upon whom I would still like to get do work for at some stage if they're ever interested. So my perspective is that I've got to be very polite in the way that I criticize them, you know. But other people, I don't have to be quite so reverent. Now, what happens is if you're not honest about where you're coming from in this regard, you develop a sort of like narcissistic mask that you identify with. If you can't recognize that you're wearing a mask, it becomes your true face, right? Now, masks are always fictional. So when you get Dan Corder and you'll see him do things like create all of these really absurd defenses of the present system, and he'll always disavow that he's defending the status quo by saying, oh no, of course I don't defend the ANC, I don't vote for the ANC, I don't encourage you to vote for them. Okay, but he's always been employed by either the SABC or some subsidiary, or now ENCA, which is owned by one of the tripartite alliance trade unions investment wings. So it's Hoskins Consolidated Investments, which is the investment branch for SACTU, which is the old textile garment, textile workers unions investment, pension investment group, right? So they control Golden Arrow and ENCA and like a whole bunch of like fairly decent sized companies, right? They've also got a big share in the company that runs all of the traffic services in the country, Syntel. I mean, like they do like the front and back end of all of the traffic tickets you sign. They supply all of the what's it called, speed cameras and speed guns, if you look at the robots up close when you're crossing the street, most of them will have Syntel on them somewhere, the logo somewhere in the back. So they do everything, and they like centrally control traffic in the major metros. They've got like these little offices where some muhu has a little make light go green, make light go red, so that they can like ease traffic. So yeah, they manage the traffic systems of the country. So you've got like this power system, which is, and I mean, Syntel comes from a group of people who've been vested in the national center since the apartheid days, since they were known as Plessy, and then they were called Telumat, and now they're called Syntel, and they used to be in the arms manufacturing business. And I'm not sure how much arms manufacturing they do anymore. I think they focus more on like systems, like infrastructural systems and all. But so this is like someone like Dan Corder. His patron is the political center and the establishment, and it's part of the ANC's network. And the way that he does this is he just disavows that he's supporting them, and then says, yes, but all of their policies and all of their positions are so perfect. There's no criticism. There's nothing wrong with them. In fact, if anything, they don't go far enough. And like, cool. I have a similar attitude towards the solidarity movement. The only thing wrong with them is they don't go far enough, right? But this is I'm upfront about it. This is actually my stated personal opinion and position, right? But someone like, and Dan Corder's not the only one. It's just that he's like the purest example. So you'll see like versions of these positions adopted by people like Richard Poplak or like any old journalist, right? Any old lefty. So Dan is snarkier. He's more of like a young sort of like Piers Morgan type, where he just likes being provocative and condescending and insulting because it's fun, right? And then he picks people who are of a lower social status, which is anyone who opposes the present system, and he cucks all over them, right? He doesn't respect them or take them seriously. And it's not honest dialogue, it's just propaganda. But the thing is that people have trained themselves to only think propagandistically. So if you end up in this thing, you get sort of attached to the drama, and you'll be drawn into sort of soap opera stuff. And one of the biggest things that happens when you get drawn into the soap opera mentality is like if you watch a debate and you get super excited, like, oh, no, he owned him. Did you see him? Like, oh, he destroyed that guy. Oh, what an own, what an argument, what a diss. If you're thinking like that, if you're feeling the vibe with this kind of stuff, you've got a virus in your head, right? Because these people don't represent you. And I'm including people on your side, right? If you watch Gareth Cliff doing his bit, he's just a DJ. He's not sitting up there going, actually, we're in deep trouble. Here's a drastic move we can do. He's still operating in the sort of safe mode where he's, people in the sort of center right pocket. They want to tell you that they're based, that they're whatever, but they sell you these like milk toast, middle of the road options. Oh, we can do a bit more free market and like a bit more better policing. Oh, we could do federalism, bro. Oh, like we could do like maybe we just cut like a bit of the welfare, hey? Oh, we like, get rid of BEE. How are you going to do this stuff? Are you out of your tree? You're going to tell me that you're going to put a party together that can destroy BEE in this country? Are you bananas? It's never going to happen, right? The only way it happens is top down. Is if, let's say, the business elite get together and they impose a new structure on society. But they can't do this because for the past 20 years, they've been giving away their companies to members of the ANC. So no corporate entity in South Africa can actually act independently of the ANC anymore. We have a system of Gleichschaltung. We live under fascist economics. Okay, and I don't mean this in a derogatory term. I mean it in a literal descriptive sense. That, like, if you go and read up something like, the Vampire Economy, that's the name of a book on like the economics of the Third Reich, or you read up on like Mussolini's sort of system of corporatism and all of that, it's the same. You allow the private sector to exist as long as it is aligned with the ruling party, and it allows key placed members of the ruling party to direct things that are happening inside them. And this is what's happened to the South African economy. There is no opposition. There's no possibility of an opposition. Not at the national level. Okay? And the most that you can aim to do is to completely destroy any possibility of meaningful opposition. And the way that you do that is continuing to be center-right. And the reason the center-right believes that they can do what they're trying to do is because they look at these polls that tell you that all of us are human beings who want to live in a world that's better than now, so therefore we're all the same. It's not like this. This is not what it is. Okay? Reality is that when you say, oh, we're all the same, we all like to breathe, I totally relate to you. I breathe air and drink water too. Yes, but there's one watering hole. Okay, the one watering hole is Pretoria, right? It's the central government. And all power and decisions and everything flow from that center, right? The JSE, the union buildings, okay, we are a very centralized society. And, there's so much possibility for devolution and so much possibility for decentralization, but it cannot happen from the center because you can't capture the center, as I said in the previous, thing that I did yesterday. So what am I trying to tell you here? It's like when you see these polls, ask yourself, what are the actual questions they're asking? Because there's a high chance that what the answers they get actually are representative. But then you've got to ask yourself, well, if it's giving you these answers and the results are that we actually all believe the same thing, but somehow electorally we're completely divided and everybody knows that there's incredible tension in society. You can get on with your colleagues or the people on the street or whatever of different races than you, but there's a subtext there. There's a subtext. There's always a subtext. There's things that remain unsaid, unspoken, unconfronted. And that you have to avoid these things if you wish to have a normal interaction with the person. Right? And there's a degree in which you can push these boundaries and elicit their true opinions. But this requires a very long, protracted conversation, right? It requires a good couple of hours with the guy where you can gently prod them and draw out their deeper opinions on matters, right? You can do this with people, but you won't like the result. In fact, most of the time it means you can never have a normal conversation with the other person again. And it's not even with people who are opposite race. I mean, I have a problem with, like, an old neighbor of mine. I cannot have a normal conversation with him anymore because he's glued to CNN. And so he sees everything in South Africa through the lens of, Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton, right? And so everything is like, DA is great. Their sort of liberal progressive policies are great. They're going to save the country. And you're an insane, racist, fascist, Trump supporter kind of guy. But he also knows that he has to kind of be friendly with me. So it's like this situation where I sit here and I have a normal conversation, and then somehow politics sneaks into it, and then I've got to go, oh, shit. Because I just sort of say, yeah, I'm doing this, I got to do that, it's for my job, blah, blah, blah. And I don't really want to get into it. It's like, okay, yes, I do political research for a living, but it doesn't mean I want to actually have normal fights with ordinary people about it, right? Sometimes I just want to talk about gardening or fynbos or, I don't know, some aspect of the informal local economy, or like, I don't know, any weird shit. Like maybe I want to talk about 1980s hardcore punk bands or something, or it doesn't matter. Sometimes I just don't want to have the same old arguments that I have online with all of you guys. I mean, think about it. I have spent 5 years every day. Every day I've either written or something, or I've produced a video, or I've been doing some research behind the scenes, or I've been attending a conference, or I've been, okay, the latter one doesn't happen all that often. But I've been doing something political every single day for 5 or 6 years. Sometimes I don't want to talk about it, right? But because of my obsession, and because of what I do, if I tell someone what I do, they will tell me, "Oh, what do you think of this, that, and the other?" And then you get drawn into these conversations. What you'll realize is that it literally doesn't matter. You will either get someone trying to appease what they think your opinion is going to be as a white man, or they're going to try. They're going to try and sort of retract themselves, and they'll say, "Actually, I think this should be the case. I think that should be the case." Something that would fucking hurt the shit out of me, right? Like land redistribution, or massive welfare programs, or quota systems, and all the usual shit that's bad, right? Everybody, this society is deeply divided. People who tell you that it's not are like, they're looking at stuff that's very, very, very superficial. If you want to look for unity, you can find it anywhere. Here's the thing. I mean, in Nazi Germany in the mid-30s, right up until the middle of Adolf Hitler's reforms of his country, pre-war, there was a group called the Association of German National Jews, who felt they had more in common with Germans who were gearing up to exterminate them than they had with Yiddish people, like Yiddish-speaking Germans. They're like, "Oh no, you're the two of the shtetl. They're like déclassé. Like, we don't want anything to do with them. We're sophisticated. We go to the opera. We are, we have high German. We have high German spoken at temple. This kind of attitude, right? And you get these, like, it's like the southern suburb sophisticates, and whatever, who will tell you shit like, we don't need bitter einders, we need the beter einders. Let's show how it's so great to be in this country. It's not great. There are enormous benefits. There are wonderful things, yes. But in between it are just like insane things, right? That no one should have to put up with. This can be an amazing country, right? It can be. But it requires certain obstacles to be cleared. And those obstacles are very, very big and pointy. So, if this was so easy, it would have been done by now. And I want to point out here that the DA have actually tried most angles that you can sell while remaining within the South Africanism, right? They have pushed progressivism as their main selling ticket. They have pushed hardliner, where conservatives' messages, and they work. Those latter messages do work. But they don't deliver on them because they're afraid of losing the bottom half. So the party has this sort of schizophrenic attitude. And you cannot actually sell center-right. The Vryheids van Plus are center-right. Okay, cool. They're not charismatic, right? They're very droog. But down here in the Cape, they've got a great reputation because they're clean, they don't steal, they confront crime, they confront corruption. They're very good, but they're boring. Nobody thinks they're an exciting group to be with, right? And they're very bureaucratic. You need sign-off from at least 3 people before you can make a social media post. It's like, even at the local, like, it's really, really, really just too much, right? So, we have this general problem of wishful thinking here. And I mean, I sit here and I know that Western Cape devolution is going to be very difficult to get off the ground. Basically, there's a good chance that it's not going to ever happen. There's a very good chance it's not going to happen. Okay, but it is literally the only solution. Okay, you have to break this country up. If you want the northern part of the country to survive, you have to separate Pretoria from Tshwane. You have to separate Soweto from Johannesburg. You have to break those metros up. It's not because they're too big, okay? Yeah, it's because you can separate Bloemfontein from the other two, towns that form part of Mangaung, right? The problem is that these are too big. It's that they are not one community. They are separate cities, right? And the problem with this is that these people have such diametrically opposed political values, right? And diametrically opposed political interests because of the divisions in society, which are economic, they are racial, they are religious. I mean, the way that people talk about everyone being Christian, but it's a nominal thing. Even people who call themselves Christians still indulge in pagan African pagan rites, right? Vast majority. Okay. So the idea that this is now something that means something, oh, we're going to just divide people by which Abrahamic religion they fall under. No. This doesn't work. This is a very slow gradient. So there are very deep cultural divisions that go down to spiritual issues, they go down to cultural issues, they go down to economic differences, differences in understanding of how the economy works, even making all of those things equal, right? I mean, me and Dan Corder come from very similar sort of socioeconomic backgrounds. He is an English-speaking South African. I'm an English-speaking South African. Both of our parents went to UCT. I mean, both of our fathers went to UCT at any rate, right? And both of us went to UCT at the same time. And yet we have diametrically opposed worldviews based on an understanding of how it works and who's the villain and who's the victim, right? And the idea that these things are trivial, that they can be solved by appealing to the fact that, everyone breathes and eats and shits, does not make sense. It looks like it makes sense if you squint and have, but I can't see it. I really cannot understand how you can maintain this perspective, because the questions that you're going to have to solve are issues of what patronage do you deal out to whom? That is how you maintain a political system. It is always a spoil system. It doesn't matter how sophisticated or law-abiding you are. There are always people that you're going to have to cut in or cut out, and they're going to be winners and they're going to be losers. And people have a fairly good understanding of what looks good to them and what doesn't. I just wish I could make people get this. It's like, and it's frustrating because people that I like, people who I look up to, see they believe in these things. And for me, it's like, again, I'm going to repeat this again. So just on the off chance that people need to hear it twice, the 3 questions. It's like, would you, because everyone wants jobs, everyone wants security, blah, 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 right? But, do you want to see your family arrested for committing a crime? Do you want to see your job? Do you want to see the not your job get selected? How do I fucking write this down? My brain turns to Swiss cheese half the time. So it's like, would you vote for a party who would make it harder for you to get a job? Would you vote for a party who would make it harder for your kids to get a quality place in an education establishment? Would you vote for a party who would hand out fewer free goods and services? Fewer free goods and services. And here's the thing. We need to strip 1/3 of government expenditure away in order to survive another decade, right? If we want to survive until 2040 as a country at all, as an ethnic group in this country, then the state has to somehow cut 1/3 of its expenditure or permanently freeze it at nominal rates and inflate the difference away in order to pay off debt, right? It needs to nationalize state-owned enterprises. Privatize state-owned enterprises, right? It has to get rid of black economic empowerment. It has to get rid of employment equity. It has to get rid of Section 32 of the Labor Relations Act, amongst other things. There's a huge number of things that need to be gotten rid of, an enormous number of things, and they are absolutely gargantuan, because the number of people who are dependent on the system running as it does is the vast majority. I want you to understand this now. We have half the country is dependent on welfare, right? About 40 to 45% are unemployed, right? Now, the usual figure quoted is 30 to 33%, whatever that is. That's people who are still looking for jobs, right? There's another 15 to 20% who've just given up. They're never going to try for a job again, right? So the total figure is close to like 45, 50% unemployment, and you have close to 45, 50% welfare dependence. Then you have another 15% of that remaining who are employed by the state or state-owned enterprises, right? Okay. So now you're getting to this point where, okay, only 40% of the country are actually working at all. Of that 40%, like a tiny, 7 points of that 40% are people who are substantially contributing to tax. And then of that 7%, I think it's like 1% who are actually contributing the critical volume of taxation, right? And I mean, you can talk about inequality being unjust, but injustice, whatever, it's like, can the system survive? Can it survive? Are you going to live through what happens when this falls apart? Because we know, okay, we've got Kildeburg, we've got farm murders, we've got this, that, and the other. We've got racial discrimination. Every school in the country is teaching people that white people are evil, must all die, blah, 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 right? All of this critical theory stuff. You're inherently evil. You'll never be able to make up for your ancestors' sins. And the implication being that the only way you can make it up is you give away all of your property and you render yourself either a slave or dead or disappear, right? It is predicated on the erasure of your existence, this entire ideology that's permeating every institution. And it's not subtle. It is never subtle, right? Everybody can see it for what it is. It's bullshit when anyone tries to defend it. And it's fine. You can live with this kind of, you can live with any kind of insane contradictory system if the economy is functioning, right? But the economy is not functioning and it's not going to survive because the proportion of our expenditure, which is taken up by debt servicing costs, keeps increasing every single year. Okay. And at a certain point, we're not going to be able to make that. And that point is around like 2035-ish, right? At current go, because we're going flipping sideways. The economy is doing this and debt is going slowly up. And at a certain point, you're going to have to default or you're going to have to take a structural readjustment loan. Now, either way, you're going to see mass bloody, unrest and violence. And the reason is very simple. It doesn't matter what you call a loan or what you do with it. A loan is a promise of future labor. And if and a loan that is unpaid is one that you cannot deliver on. Now, if you cannot deliver on your promises, then people can't deliver on theirs. And everyone has promised to do things in the future that they cannot do is basically what's happening at an aggregate level. And when that comes crashing down, it means you cannot deliver food, you cannot deliver services, you cannot deliver goods, right? So this comes crashing down and someone has to pay for it eventually, right? The money is not infinite. In fact, it's quite restricted. And, there are a lot of smart black nationalists who understand this, but then their move is to go, okay, well, you just print money, right? It's insane. I mean, because you redistribute there's the same amount of value in society. You're redistributing it by printing it. You can take it by tax or you can distribute it by inflation, but it's the same thing. You can do it by loan, and it's again, loans are the same thing because they are paid either through taxation or money printing. So it's all the same. It's all the same. It doesn't matter if you can dress it up in MMT or Keynesianism or whatever you want to do. At the end of the day, people have to get paid. And if you're distributing the money without consequence, like MMTers tell you it is, eventually the consequences come in such a massive way that the only solution is extraordinary violence. Either to put down people who are demanding goods and services, or to put down the people who could supply it. The people who have stuff, right? And either way, you're in for a rough time, and people are going to suffer because you've let society run on the premise of making promises that cannot be delivered. And the promises that absolutely cannot be delivered is everyone gets a happy time. And the reason that no one can get this stuff, that they all agree they want security, jobs, all of this, is the very means for delivering these things that have been established, that people have become structurally dependent on, are destroying the ability to deliver in the future. And if you take away those policies, you've got huge clusters of very powerful people embedded in many different sectors and areas of society who are all of a sudden not going to be able to get a paycheck tomorrow. They are not going to be able to get their brown envelopes tomorrow. And big parts of those areas of society, big parts of the society, come with existential penalties for failing to maintain the flow of patronage. Okay? Lots of people have their literal lives on the line to maintain the flow of illicit funds from the state to various sectors. Right? This is why people die in KZN every year. Local level political assassinations. Whistleblowers get assassinated. All kinds of stuff happens because this stuff is life and death for some people. And you're going to tell me you're simply going to unplug this. Oh, it's simple. No. Okay? That is assuming you can get an absolute majority in the ballot box. Then you could even think about unplugging it. Right? This is the level people this is what people are trying to sell you. It is a fantasy. The idea that this entire edifice is going to collapse because the DA gets an extra 1 or 2 points at the ballot box next in 2029 is the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard of. The DA are either going to acquiesce to this system and try and bargain with it like they bargained with the ANC in this coalition, or they're going to be cut out completely in favor of an ANC reunion coalition. Now, there's another option which is that, okay, Zuma kicks the bucket, EFF dwindles away to nothing, everybody comes back to the ANC. Because these people who are voting for those parties are not going back to the ANC. They are not going back to the ANC. And the total number of voters in that whole Charterist bloc is the same. They have not changed. It's gone down by 5 or 6% since Thabo Mbeki's time, but it's the same. So this country is done for, and the idea that we have enough in common is silly. Okay, I'm going to answer a couple of questions from you two who have commented, and then hello, sister-in-law. Okay, let's see. There's only a couple of you who what's it? Okay, peace, human rights. Yeah, those are spooker. The spooker. If you believe that, aren't you the problem and aren't you the right for not wanting you there? Right. Yesterday you said you don't want to be a second Israel. If there's no place for change and it needs to be your way or not, there X is no... What? Dude, you have to write complete sentences with decent spacing and punctuation, or there comes a point where you can't actually read it, my friend. People need to realize we're in this together. You can choose to fight, but that comes with those consequences, right? Okay, that's kind of like a truism. Like, those who are in it together are in it together, and those who aren't. Like, kind of true by definition. That doesn't really tell you much. Yeah, I don't worry about Israel. I mean, look, it's not my bag. I don't want to. I don't want to talk about Israel and their troubles. If you want to learn something from them, then you've got to ask yourself, well, what am I trying to do here, where I am? What am I expecting to? Then you can read Israel and you say like, oh, they solved this problem by this or this. Don't worry about whether they're your team or not your team. What are you? What are you, like a football fan? They're a football team? No, they're a country with their own people and their own problems and their own history, right? You can learn about how to solve particular political and economic problems by observing this, but you cannot actually have any gain from looking at these foreign things and saying like, they're the good guys and they're the bad guys. Well, I mean, this is pantomime thinking, right? It's not helpful. You can sit and moralize about it all you like, but they're still going to keep doing what they're doing. You're not going to affect it. What are you trying to do? You're going to tell everyone, oh, I'm a good person because I'm with the good guys. No, it doesn't mean anything. I mean, you'll find good and evil people supporting all kinds of stuff. It's pointless. It doesn't mean anything at all. Right? So I don't like this kind of moralism. Oh, you're against apartheid. Oh, well done for you. Naughty badge. It's like, well, yeah, it's in the past. Who cares? Oh, they didn't condemn necklacing. Yeah, they're not going to. Who cares? It's like, well, the problem is there. How are you going to solve it? Forget all of this stuff. The past is a different country, and different countries are not your business. You go back there to learn why things are the way they are and what can be done about it. That's it. Okay? People obsess about Israel on, don't worry about it. Detach. Okay? Don't get sucked into other people's drama. It's like people who watch, like my neighbor who watches CNN and gets emotionally invested in whether like Donald Trump is a good or a bad guy. Who gives a damn? Right? If he's useful to you, make an appeal, right? Work with organizations who are lobbying the Americans and make an appeal. I did it, and I pointed out and I've published about it. So the stuff that I've written in private for various people is also like I've put those opinions in different packaging in public as well because I believe in them. So like the thing that I wrote about Cape, the Cape of Good Hope, and it's the invisible choke point. That one is that one's quite important because if you're going to sell something to the Americans, you have to say, well, here's your vested interest in it. The other vested interest is you don't want South Africa to break apart and then the whole Southern African economy collapses. You want to actually ring fence portions of it so that capital can be rescued and moved. So you actually need to split off different parts of the country before the national default on the debt. And do you know what I mean? So this is kind of where I'm getting at. Is there are ways you can sort of sell it as, oh, okay, it's in your interest that we do well. Please work with us. That's a completely different perspective from like, oh, I'm going to play a part of your weird game that you've got in the Middle East. I don't want to be supporting all of this kind of stuff. It's really just, it's not my business. I don't want to sit and bicker about American policies either. I get a little bit hit up about English policies because my parents still live there, right? And I would care about the Swiss problem where my sister lives if I understood their political system and if there was anything wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with Switzerland. Switzerland is a perfectly well-running machine, and my sister is very big on the rules, so she gets along just fine. She's not going to screw up, she's not going to. The system will not come and get her, So I don't worry about continental Europe too much. I don't, I hope America does well, but it's like, yeah. Oh, here we go. Ian McGilchrist and Robert Greene are both actors and now both neurology and brain and narcissistic specialists. Okay, look, narcissism is just an idea, okay? And you don't need to be like a technical expert to know what it is. Anyone who tells you that they're a technical expert in the field of psychology is a charlatan. Okay, anyone can be knowledgeable and convincing about this kind of field. If you have a decent understanding of how people work, you don't, and you can use a concept to describe things, and maybe it's real and maybe it isn't, but it's all fuzz. Like 85% of all research in this whole field is unreplicable, and what remains is a very weak correlation with reality. So it's how should I put it? Take it with a pinch of salt. Don't take it too seriously. Like there are no experts in psychology. Or like, okay, let me put it this way: it's not that there's no experts, but expertise doesn't count for an enormous amount in a field that is so fuzzy and so little understood, even at the highest level, that intuition actually still counts for a huge amount. So if someone's sort of saying, if someone's trying to sell you that, oh, this is how it really is, look, take the concepts as being fuzzy, okay, and then just sort of use your intuition to fill in the gaps, because that's where we are with psychology. Don't worry about it. Couple more questions, and then I'm going to have to check out because there only are a couple of questions here. The DA do a court book and just dissolve into the ANC, possibly, from Patrick Vianello. I don't think so. I think the DA are actually going to continue to survive as a political party, and I don't think they're going to collapse. I don't think they're going to collapse. I think, look, if they're facing real consequences for their actions, they'll lose maybe 10% of their support. I don't mean 10 points nationally. That would be insane. But 10% of their support. So they would lose, 5 to 10% in the Cape. Maybe 5 to 10 points in the Cape. That would be a sign of them getting come up into the ballot box. Because I think even if people hated the DA, if every supporter of the DA woke up tomorrow and decided they hated them, they're the worst people in the world, they'd still vote for them. That's the problem. Is it's got nothing to do with people's esteem in the DA and everything to do with whether they think there's an alternative. And the problem with the center-right alternative is that you're inviting people who don't want to do anything radical to drain energy from people who do. It's a bad idea. Yeah, it's very hard to convince people to vote. I love Courtney Mulder. I think he's fantastic as an individual. But the party, the way the party works means that he actually can't do the things that he wants to do. He's the one who pushed for Cape independence to be on the policy ballot. He's actually kind of a serious guy. The trouble is he's working with people who, he can't do without to form a coalition, to run the party. He has to work with certain people. And he's a great politician in a lot of ways. But he's not Napoleon. He's not Stalin. You can't just, you will do what I say. You can't do that. No. But yeah, so that's kind of what I'm saying. There's a limit to what you can change at the ballot box. And I think what I'm looking at increasingly is trying to think about ways that you can sort of do things outside of the parliamentary system. And it's a lot of that ground is taken up by solidarity. But one has to think what can actually be achieved, and what needs to be achieved. What can you afford to lose? What can you afford to sacrifice? And I think the problem is that we're constantly on the defensive, and there has to be a sort of conception of what an offensive position would look like. How do we because as long as you're defending, you're losing. Okay, there has to be some kind of decision that pushes back and creates a new space for something new. I think, look, the Afrikaners at the very least are trying new things, radically new things that haven't been tried in most places in the world. There are only 2 or 3 examples globally for what they're doing here. They're like other examples, like Mormons, Israelis, Hezbollah. I know that that's a weird collection of comparisons, but it's sort of like they're at the early phases of what those projects turn out to be. But they're struggling to embrace. They're struggling to embrace this seriously, right? And the necessity for taking control of actual settlements, that's what they need, right? And it's this. The problem is, if anyone is coming to you and selling you the idea that the solution is in national parliament, they're not helping you. I don't believe this is true. I think it is kind of too late. That said, I don't think it's actually a bad idea to have the DA where they are in national government. Because you do need some people who are not clinically insane who are up there. But it's not enough, and it's not going to fix the problem. So the DA are a doorstop. That's their job. Their job is to be a doorstop and keep the real nutcases out. That's it. They're not your heroes. They are dead weight. Dead weight is useful, right? Dead weight is very useful, but it's also just dead weight. You've got to see a tool for what it is. The DA are there to block. That's all they are. And in some places, you need to block to buy time. But buying time for what? Buying time for discrete, serious actions. And the problem is there's a lack of direct action. And that direct action to control territory doesn't have to be violent, but it has to actually be deliberate. And you have to choose it, and you have to do it in an organized fashion. So that's what needs to happen. People need to be focusing on controlling territory and controlling sectors of the market and how to violate national policy without getting caught, or if you're caught, being beyond enforcement. These are the dimensions that you need to be thinking about, or we need to be thinking about now. How to move forward against the state in a purely adversarial sense. And it's a mentality shift, right? Because the thing is, I've made that mentality shift myself like a couple of years now. But you have to understand, after you do that, then you have to now figure out what the actual moves are. And it doesn't matter how smart you are, you're not going to know where all of the nooks and crannies in the country are for opportunities. And you're going to find that someone you've never heard of is going to come up with some really, really interesting solution somewhere out there. And if he's going to come up with that solution, he has to first actually adopt the mindset that he has permission to do this. And some people don't need to be told they have permission. Some people just act. But but a lot of people do. A lot of people think, I don't have the right to do this, and everything's over, and I'm going to leave. It's because they're waiting for permission to do things that they deserve to do. So it's a lot of this problem is psychological. It's like, how do you get people in the place where they're ready to take action? And I think the thing is, like, the only thing we should be really the big task at a national level is convincing the DA that their job is actually just buying time before collapse. But because that is all they can do. But then to take the project seriously, and to frustrate the ANC as much as possible everywhere, and to be really aggressive about it. Like, okay, well, if you can get powers back in the Cape, take them. If you're going to tie up the ANC in court, do it. Doesn't matter. Like, if you have the balls to do it, ignore court orders. If you're a government official, like, try and see if that'll work. Because I think I mean, I don't know if this is the moment for it. Maybe in 5 years' time, we'll see opportunities for this, right? But it has to be a thing where you have to at least start thinking about it, because the point in time will come where if you are not psychologically prepared to do so, and I know I'm not. I know I'm still sort of like sitting here in house cat mode, and I think most people are in house cat mode, right? You're not ready to run for your life. You're not ready to fight for your life, right? And the problem with this, the real psychological barrier is that you're going to have to run for your life and fight for your life in a virtual environment. And I don't mean online. I mean virtual in the sense that you're not actually directly fighting anyone. You're dealing with bureaucracy. You're dealing with economic problems. These are virtual problems, right? They are not direct confrontation with physical danger. And that's what makes it so hard, is you have to kind of force yourself to psychologically behave as if you're in physical danger in a virtual zone, you know. That's what's really tricky, is that your task is to do this, is to try and shift your goals completely. There are people who've managed to make this mentality sort of shift, and there are people who haven't. And if you look at the black nationalists, there's even if their ideas are a bit kooky, their obsession with sort of consciousness is a real thing. And look, they'll be far of the mark a lot. Don't worry about the bulk of them. Just focus on the ones who are actually trying to use their brains. They have a very big point here, is that the majority of their own people are waiting for other people to solve their problems for them. And the thing is, they're not alone. It's white people have been civilized. We have been house trained. And getting over house training is hard. We are house cats. We're all domesticated animals. You, me, okay? And we have to try and figure out a way of thinking as if we're not domesticated animals. This is a huge task. Most of it, you're an adult already. You've lived your whole life as a domesticated animal. Now you've got to start living as as a wild animal, as a predator, or frankly, in many cases, as a prey animal that's got to run. Either way, you've got to realize that you are not in a sheltered environment anymore, right? And we've grown very, very accustomed to the idea that we've got protection. We've got private security. We've got all this. We can afford it, but we're not going to be able to afford it forever. Eventually, that's going to go away. Or maybe the current regulatory battle, perhaps the current regulatory battle with PSIRA loses, and they pass that insane regulation that's going to kill all of the private security companies. Chances are they're going to lose that battle and things will continue as normal, but the chance is there, right? And what we have done is we're one group of house cats who've trained another group of house cats to do. The weird thing about modern society is the level of complexity is such that even people who are working in private security are house cats. In the sense that they obey the law. The ones who don't have enormous power, and this is this is the distinction. Cyril was talking about like changing the regulations so that in various ways that would effectively make it illegal for people to carry certain kinds of firearms and so on. But they actually you need semi-automatics in order to confront, right? I like the term domesticated, by the way. I think that's the best term to use really for this. But you're domesticated, for the lack of a better term, your law-abiding security companies are going to be screwed over by this because they're not ready to make the transition to saying, yeah, we don't care. We're going to keep our weapons. And if you come for us, we'll kill you. Right? They're not willing to make that. And this is the most insane thing, because what they're doing now is they're saying, we are going to make ourselves and our clients defenseless in the most violent country on the planet because we don't want to challenge the weakest security force on the planet. Whereas you've got gangsters, right, who will have a security company, who are completely incompetent alcoholic losers with no proper qualifications, and Ciro doesn't want to enforce existing regulations on those people because they're afraid they might get targeted. So it's like, that's what I mean by like domesticated. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to be like most cases. You don't actually have to go all the way and challenge the state at a violent level. Sometimes it's just a matter of, can you ignore a regulation and play for time until the paperwork gets lost? And you can do that with a lot of things. You can do it with labor regulations. You can do that with some aspects of tax. Unless you're a high value, if you're a high net worth individual, you cannot delay taxing. They're going to come for you. They prioritize you, right? So, you know, the idea is you can't see all this stuff as legitimate. Now, I remember, I can't remember what it is. A friend of mine, there's someone I follow on Twitter who's reviewing a book about the mafia, and I can't remember, it was Gaetano Mosca, one of the elite theorists that was writing this book on the mafia in Sicily and the culture behind it. And the thing is, there's two senses of the word. It doesn't refer to an organization. It also refers to a culture, which says that it's unmanly and pathetic to have the officials sort your problems out for you. So if you've got a dispute, you go and solve it yourself with your own violence. If you've got a hole in the road, you patch it yourself. It's that kind of thing, right? And the Afrikaners are trying to get the self-reliance thing going, but they're stopping short of the mafia mentality. And I suspect that we are going to actually have to transition to that mafia mentality in order to survive, because most of the country has that, and we're the only ethnic group that, broadly speaking, doesn't. Well, it's for Swearimg says, why not a house dog? It's actually an established idiom that I'm referring to. It's not something I invented. Like house cat versus alley cat, you know? So if you become an alley, like the alley cat sort of steals food, it's not waiting to be given food, you know? It's like, you know, if you look at barbarians versus peasants, your barbarians who live outside society nomadically and they raid communities for sustenance, and then they move on, they come back next season, right? It's like, it's the horse riders on the hill that you see in the beginning of Seven Samurai. Those are your barbarians, right? And the state is basically sedentary barbarians. The state are alley cats who are fat from eating the house cat's food. That's the way you have to think about it. So to complete the analogy, but that's very James Scott stuff anyway. But no, my perspective on this matter is basically just we're going to have to cross some kind of Rubicon, you know, mentally in the next few years. And I don't know if I'm ready for it. I think it's quite likely that I will remain for most of my life a house cat, unless something drastic happens. Because, I mean, I live in one of the more peaceful parts of the country, and I'm in a line of work that places me outside of direct confrontation. I don't own a company. I don't make things. I don't run private security. I don't do. So I'm kind of outside of the confrontation. I'm sitting here as a high level of observer, and it's not highly likely that I'm going to ever be directly involved in anything bad or wrong, right? Or anything dangerous, right? I'm probably going to end up being a law-abiding citizen for much of my life unless crazy things happen to me. And so I say this with a degree of humility that I'm well aware of how scary that transition probably is for a lot of people, and how few people are prepared to do it, and how most people are probably going to want to retreat to the United States. But we're looking, or to Europe. And many people have, because they don't want to leave the house cat life behind. But you're going to see a lot of people who advertise the alley cat position, but they can't make the transition. And I think the thing is that we have to actually realize that You cannot be both. You cannot. You're going to have to make a sacrifice. So you look at people who say, "Oh, we're going to get off the grid." Cool, you're off the grid. That's great, right? But you're still making sure never to break rules, right? You're still making sure that you're getting along with the rest of society. You're following the rules. You're participating in it. And that's all fine and good as long as no one comes for you. What are you going to do when someone comes for you? When the sheriff shows up and says, the sheriff of the court shows up and says, "Sorry, someone has decided that they like your house," or something like that. Or let's say the rand goes through the floor, or let's say there's so many land invasions around you that life becomes unsustainably violent and disruptive. What are you going to do? Right? And the answer for most people is retreat. It's retreat, 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 retreat. Even going off the grid is a retreat. If you were, let's say you could command your own war band. Like you said, let's say you raised all of the able-bodied 18 somethings in your entire neighborhood, put a gun in their hand, right? And then you say, we're not having our power cut. We're taking the power plant and we're going to make sure that neighborhood's cut because screw you, and this is going to get up running. And you're going to have to wait until we build a new power plant on our own dime, on our own land, by our own permission to get your cut, and you're going to pay us for it. Right? That is thinking like a state, because that's how a state operates. A state decides who gets and who doesn't get. They decide who gives and who doesn't have to give. And if the state is going to crumble, people have to be prepared to make the move. Now is not the time to move because the state is still too strong. It is clearly the case. But you have to be prepared for the fact that time is coming, and it is not going to be easy. You are not a badass. You are a house cat, and you are going to get hurt. So it's more about realizing where you are, what is coming, and sort of thinking, well, how much are you willing to sacrifice? If it's too scary for you, leave, right? And if you feel that you cannot but do the right, do what's required here, then stick around and prepare to be pushed into very uncomfortable positions. So, and those uncomfortable positions will occur middle of next decade, and it's or early next decade, maybe even sooner if the government gets really jumpy. So I think it's one of those things where we're still relying on. One of the other dimensions that I think is really crazy is the fact that the financial cartel that sort of sits in this country, Big Five, they're heavily cooperative with the ruling government. So if they decide that they don't want you organizing, they'll just cut your access to the economy. And the government hasn't used that policy yet because it's really, really hectic. But it's something that people actually have to be prepared for. You can't. You're living in a society, and I think that the guys at Sakeliga said it best. They said that we're under sanctions. The government has placed sanctions against sectors of its own population. There's economic sanctions against white people, right? And the thing about economic sanctions is, up to a certain point, it does strengthen you. It makes you more resilient. But beyond a certain point, you start falling apart. Okay. Iraq was not made stronger by a decade of sanctions, right? Russia was made very much stronger by sanctions. But if the sanctions continued forever and they couldn't find a way around them, right? If Russia wasn't willing to break laws to maintain trade, right? They would be having a hard time. They would be having a hard time. As such, they have challenges, right? And those challenges have proved to be unpleasant for sectors of the population, but it hasn't been detrimental. It's placed them in a number of awkward positions, and if those awkward positions continue forever, then they're in trouble. Right? It's like nothing lasts forever, and nothing comes without an upside and a downside. My sort of thing over here is to just, we can't wait forever, and we have to start preparing for things to get worse, right? and it means looking for some new solutions. It means being more vigilant. I will try and find some good. I'll try and put together some strategies for this over the next 6 months to a year that are much more sort of sectorally detailed, and I'll be trying to work with other people to do it. But it's a lot of work, eh? Like, don't kid yourself. Like, there are not a lot of people who are ready to do this. There are people helping. So NEASA, if you have employees, go talk to NEASA. If you're a business of any kind, talk to Sakeliga. Get yourself labor representatives who are very, very viciously anti-unions. Get yourself labor reps who are like, you're going to take your shit seriously, And NEASA is definitely up there. NEASA is the ones who you need in your corner, because they're the only ones who really are seriously combative. As far as at the moment, Sakeliga are still the best business advice. AfriForum's good for local security and a couple of other things, but all of this is going to all of these organizations are going to have to find new ways to collaborate, to work within the parameters of the law for now, to prepare for when they have to break them. And those strategies haven't all been identified. I mean, like, I've got a few of them, but like some of them are already out of date. So because the laws change, so how do you keep up with them? The third wave BEE stuff is crazy. I mean, I'm more worried that we're at the stage where it's something you just have to break the law. Which is crazy, because if we're at that stage now, we're not ready. The state is still too strong. We're not ready to directly break the law. People are going to get hurt. People are going to get arrested. People are going to have their stuff confiscated. So that third wave BEE stuff is very worrying. Very worrying. David asked, "Do I have a mailing list?" No, I don't. When my website gets up again in a week or so, the problems I've been having with that fucking website. It's going to be under a new domain name because problems. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I have to end. I went on way longer than I thought I would. But yeah. Cheers, guys.